To talk about some recent votes happening in Washington, D.C. on this day. Scott, good afternoon. Welcome in.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Look, we're tackling the hard questions. I had a caller ask if Joe is out and Kamala's in, could Kamala pick Barack to be her running mate for vice president? That's how deeply we're going here, Scott.
Yeah, I heard your interpretation, and I think they went through this a little bit when Hillary was a potential, or she was the nominee, and whether Bill Clinton could be a vice president. I think technically you cannot be elected more than twice, and you think they would have cleaned that up a little better in the 22nd Amendment. But, for example, if Michelle Obama became the nominee, could she pick Barack as her vice president, which is a very scary ticket, but considering he would not be elected three times, if she stepped down, he could serve out the rest of her term, but he could not be reelected for a third term.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. I don't know the exact answer, and it is up for debate, but hopefully we don't have to come across that.
Yes. Let us all hope. Perish the thought that comes up at some point this summer. Although, the questions abound, and Congressman, it begs the host of this show to ask you, our good congressman from the state of Tennessee, the question: do you think Joe sticks around on the ballot? Can he survive what is clearly a Democrat crisis, not an American crisis? Maybe we could call it that, considering he is the president of the United States. But does he stick around as the candidate for the Democrats, or will they, by hook or crook, replace him?
Yeah, he's trying to run out the clock because they've got to make a decision, I think, before the DCCC convention and the delegates are cast. Now, I suppose if he resigned after that, they could still put in a replacement. But I think he's defiant, and shame on his family because he's not capable of holding the office. I never thought he would make it this far. I was saying a year ago he would never run for a second term, but yet here we are. It is interesting to watch the tug of war going on here on the Hill amongst the Democrats, and it's interesting on the Armed Services Committee, which I serve, the ranking member and several other Democratic members who are more neutral when it comes to national policy are asking for him to step aside, as well as you see the Hollywood elite, George Clooney. I saw John Daly eviscerated the media and the Democratic Party for the cover-up for his debate performance. But it's a really interesting dilemma for them. And what amazes me is the shock of the revelation of the liberal media that Joe Biden is not who they thought he was until that debate, when we've been talking about it for, before he was even elected, about his mental faculties and his incapacitation to be the commander-in-chief. So it's kind of entertaining in a way to watch them struggle and try to pass this off as some new revelation. But, I don't have a great answer. He's holding in there tough, but the momentum is building to make him step down, and the money is drying up. And if that happens, I think they see the writing on the wall that he can't win. The polling is suggesting that as well.
Well, in the meantime, for those conservatives in our audience, for the libertarians in the audience, for, the voters of Scott DesJarlais, we can watch this with a little bit of a detached amusement because this is not our party. This is not our chaos. This is their chaos. Well, that's all fine and good in terms of the campaign. But what frightens me, Scott, is who's minding the henhouse during the next 7 months? Is that the conversation going on in Washington, D.C. amongst your colleagues? Because my fear is I want to know who's running the country. And if we do not have a mentally capable commander-in-chief, how is that not a constitutional crisis that merits a conversation about the 25th Amendment?
Well, I don't think he's been calling the shots since he was selected as their nominee and was hidden in the basement during COVID. So I don't think he's been pulling the strings. Clyburn from South Carolina was the one that forced them to choose Kamala Harris. That was not his choice. Biden did not like her. And I think Obama, Soros, people behind the scenes, call it deep state, whatever you want to call it, is running the country. He's clearly not capable. His excuses for a poor debate performance, such as a head cold or jet lag from 10 days prior, is not a viable answer. If he gets woke up at 2 in the morning and says the Russians have just detonated a low-yield nuclear weapon, what are we going to do? He won't have his faculties. He won't make that decision, and he's not been making those decisions. So, yeah, he's not fit to serve 4 more years. I don't think he's fit to serve 4 months. And he shouldn't be serving now. I think it's pretty clear that he's not in charge and he's not capable.
So let's talk about what happened today on the floor of the House of Representatives. The SAVE Act was passed. Thank you to the Republican Party for doing so. 198 Democrats voted against this legislation. Were you surprised that so many Democrats voted against it and nakedly declared that they don't really care if illegal aliens are voting in our federal elections?
I was stunned. I mean, you think if you're a House member from any of the border states, and you've got to go back and explain to your constituents who are equally upset about the border crisis that you did not vote for this, you can bet that there's going to be an ad run against every vulnerable member in any of those states, or really it should be anywhere across the country. When Speaker Johnson was giving his message on the floor today, he was naming off multiple states where they had purged the records of, it wasn't thousands, but there were hundreds of voters in cases where illegals had voted, and they weren't the border states where it's more prevalent. It wasn't California. God knows how many have voted there, but they're actually, they encourage them to register. They have to, check a box saying they're a citizen, but there's no checks and balance. There's no way to make them prove that. So we know it's going on. And yeah, I was actually stunned. I figured that we would pull 50 or 60 vulnerable Democrats to vote in favor of this, because 90% of all Americans agree that Americans should elect Americans in elections, and that includes Democrats. They may be 82 or 88%, but when you take the voting population, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, whatnot, almost everyone's got it right. You can't vote in an American election unless you're an American citizen. So, yeah, I'm a little stunned that they stuck together. I think it's going to hurt a lot of them.
4th Congressional District Representative of the great state of Tennessee, Scott DesJarlais, joining us on The Drive. Matt Murphy in for Brian Wilson today. Scott, the weak argument, and I think it's a phony baloney argument, but I want you to respond to it. The Democrats who voted against this thing said, hey, this is already against the rules, and the Republicans are just making stuff up. We don't have non-citizens voting in federal elections. This is just election year nonsense, and they're trying to make it harder for legal citizens to register to vote. How do you respond to those allegations?
Well, just what I said. We're relying on the honor system. So somebody fills out a census and they say, yes, I'm a citizen, but there's no checks and balances. They don't have to prove that they are. These people broke the law by coming into our country. What makes you think that they're not going to break the law and vote? And why has Biden allowed up to 16 million illegals to cross our border? And it's not people seeking asylum or a fear of persecution from their countries. These are mostly 18 to 59-year-old single men who are coming here, many of them Chinese, Venezuelans, as Trump said, empty in prisons, this and that. Yes, there are some families that are seeking refugee status, but that's the majority of the people that have come in under Biden are working-age males, and many of them have been on the terrorist watch list. We don't know anything about them. And why should we trust somebody whose first action when coming to America is to break the border laws or the immigration laws? So, yeah, their argument is really weak, as you said, and it's common sense that there should be some type of proof. Like, why do we not have voter ID laws in every state? Why? How can you not ask somebody to prove who you are when you're voting? Just states like Maryland here, my chief of staff's daughter, who's 16, got a ballot. My chief called and said, why is my daughter getting a ballot? That's okay, don't worry about it. Well, Maryland's mostly Democrats, so they know if 16-year-olds are voting, they're going to vote Democrat. There'll be a smattering of Republicans, but they probably wouldn't do it because they're honest. So, there is fraud in elections, and there are illegals that are voting, and there's proof of that.
Scott, so where does this go in the Senate? Do you think it goes anywhere in the Senate? Obviously the Democrats have control over there, and they have I wouldn't think that they would have any interest in bringing this up.
I doubt that they will. And the president, interestingly, issued a veto threat if they did pass it from the Senate. So here you have a guy, open borders, 16 million people coming in, isn't concerned about them voting in an election. It's what we thought all along. Why would he be allowing our country to be invaded like this? And it's for the reason that we passed this bill today, or one of the reasons.
Real quick, Scott, I got a boogie, but I need to ask you about Anna Paulina Luna and her move to force a vote on resolutions holding Attorney General Merrick Garland in inherent contempt. Are you in favor of that or not? And if so, why?
Well, I think most of us are in favor of doing it. The timing we question. Today we had a very good message on illegals not voting. this will suck up some oxygen tonight, whether or not this is, Republicans just making a political statement. I voted to hold him in contempt because he ignored a subpoena. There's other people in the Trump administration serving in jail right now, Steve Bannon's being one of them, Peter Navarro being another. So I think he needs to be held accountable, but it could have been referred through committee. It could have been done through proper channels. I don't think that the timing was right, but I do think it's something that needed to be addressed.